Well, good afternoon, everybody, if you're in the UK, or good morning if you're just about morning here if you're in the USA. Very warm welcome from me. My name's Duncan Edwards. I'm the CEO of British American Business, and it's a real pleasure to welcome you all to this CEO discussion with our very special guest, Shai Weiss, who is, as everybody knows, the CEO of Virgin Atlantic. And we're going to have a broad-ranging discussion on the issues that have impacted Shai's company and the airline business over the last 8 months, and a discussion about what the future looks like for that industry in a moment. For those of you who are new to British American Business, we are the leading transatlantic trade organization. We represent British and American companies and advocate for an open trade and investment relationship between the US and the UK. And I'm delighted to say that Shai is a member of our advisory board as well. So it's great to have you with us. Just to go through the program, this is a webinar, so we can't see you. Hopefully you can see us and hear us. So it's going to be a discussion between me and Shai, but we want this to be, we want you to get involved, and there's a number of ways you can do that. You can talk to each other and comment on what we're saying through the chat function, and you can send me a question to put to Shai as well through the Q&A function. I think everybody is sufficiently Zoom veteran to know how all of those functions work. So with that, let's get this show on the road. And I would say that, you know, clearly a lot of businesses have had a tough time over the last 8 months, but it's hard to imagine. It's hard to imagine an industry that's had a tougher experience than the airline business. And even within that, you know, an organization like Virgin, with its reliance on long-haul travel, has had the most challenging time, and we are going to explore some of those challenges with Shai. So welcome, Shai. Thank you very much for doing this with us. It's good to see you.
Yeah.
Before we get into that, I mean, it'd be helpful for those that don't know you to perhaps just give us a little bit of your kind of background, and you know, because you're not someone who's sort of lived and breathed the airline business your whole career. So maybe just give us sort of a couple of minutes on that, and you know, how you ended up as the CEO of Virgin Atlantic.
Yeah, and I'm going to be super. So first of all, thank you, and welcome to everybody on the line. I'm going to be super brief because it's really not that interesting how I got here, but I was born and raised in Israel, and kind of was there until I was about 24. And then after a kind of tour of South America, landed in New York, where I always wanted to be, worked for the Israeli Ministry of Defense there, and then got my MBA, moved to London, worked for Morgan Stanley in the M&A group. So I kind of did a finance role, but my quest always was to work for operating company. So at some point, I actually joined a company called NTL, which is then called Virgin Media. Did a big transaction where we bought Virgin Mobile, changed the name, rebranded the company, got to know Richard Branson, and have been affiliated with the Virgin Group for the past 16 years or so, through a vast of roles. But in 2012, I joined the board of Virgin Atlantic first,
Right.
And then joined as an executive in 2014, first as a chief financial officer, then chief commercial officer. And at the beginning of 2018, took over as CEO. I'm married, 2 kids, live in London. I've been here for a very long time. Consider this home. And yeah, little did I know that I would be in this position during this time.
Well, that's super helpful. So that gives us the context. So you've been when the crisis struck, you've been the CEO for about 18 months or something like that.
Yes.
You know, I mean, give us a sense of, you know, how the business was doing before this crisis hit. You know, I remember doing an event with you and Ed Bastian in New York City last year, and it was one of those kind of moments when the airline industry seemed kind of super optimistic, and particularly the US airline business was seeing kind of very positive levels of profitability, and share prices were reflecting that. I mean, how was business for Virgin before March?
Yeah, so it was actually, we were ahead of our plans. We had launched Velocity, our 3-year plan at the beginning of 19, which was basically to turn the impediments that prevented people from buying our tickets, specifically a network, specifically a loyalty program, and a few other things, but really relying on the fact that we have the most amazing people that deliver the best service across the Atlantic as voted by customers. So the plan was to really go after our secret sauce, which is to be the most loved travel company over time, return to profitability. We said 2021, but we were on track to do that a year early. 2019 was very much on plan. Growth in the revenue numbers, growth in customer satisfaction, growth in the engagement of our people, and about break even on the path to profitability. But and then of course January showed up, and things started in January actually for the people, probably even before that in terms of the actual epidemic or pandemic as it turned out to be. But for us, things started to change in January.
But just talk about that. So when did you first realize that there was something going on here? I mean, could you see that in your Asia business, your numbers?
Yeah. I was in the US, in New Orleans of all places, and I think it was 26th of January, give or take, in an external board which I participate in. And I cut my trip short by one day and moved back to London to make a decision which was, in that context, quite severe. We suspended flying to Shanghai on February the 1st. That was our last flight.
Okay.
And
was that driven by them or by you? Was that driven
by us? By us. It was also, just the health and safety of our crew, just the uncertainty, the demand, of course, started to evaporate, and we thought a 50% fall in that route was a big deal. It was a big deal, but of course we didn't know the full devastation that the COVID-19 pandemic will bring on, of course, the lives and livelihoods of people. We shouldn't forget, airlines are hit hard, but underlying that is a tremendous impact on people around the world. But so that's when we first started to take note of this, and suspending a line to China, that seemed like the biggest decision we would ever make. And then, of course, from April the 21st, for a period of 90 days, Virgin Atlantic took 0 passengers around the world. Just to tell you how things evolved from that period. So we took it very seriously, always with the focus of the health and security and safety of our people and passengers. But that was the beginning. And of course, things really took off from there, and I think March was the tipping point, of course.
Yeah, so walk us through that. So you suspended the flight to Shanghai in February, and then was it a route by route kind of close down, or was there a moment in sort of mid-March when you realized that you had to suspend everything? Well, I kind of knew it at the time because I was following all of this, but I've kind of forgotten what happened.
I think first of all, March was already a big turn of events. Countries were starting to go into lockdown. We had already, on behalf of industry, and we're kind of ridiculed for that, but already wrote to the Prime Minister in the middle of March that this pandemic would have a terrible impact on the lives and livelihoods of so many, and that concentrated efforts would be required by our governments to help preserve jobs and really keep the economy going. We were not trying to be self-serving to Virgin Atlantic. This was really on behalf of industry. So we did that.
We're going to talk about that.
We'll come back to, I'm sure. Yes. We also, I think we also requested from our people basically to take, we were ahead. We've always tried to be ahead of, the environment and our competitors and just the situation. And we asked our people to take an 8-week unpaid leave, and we had a vote. 99% of our people voted in favor. And that's when I knew that, first of all, I was fortunate enough to be in this crisis leading the most amazing group of people, and that despite all the odds, we were going to accomplish the impossible and make it possible, which we did. I'll just say one other thing, that and at some point, just before the UK went into lockdown, and I think it's pertinent for today, Imperial College, Ferguson issued his seminal paper on what would happen. And I read it on a Saturday, and on a Sunday, I wrote a one page. I'm a stickler for one pages, and set out our response to this crisis, understanding that we may not be able to rely on government support. And even if we were fortunate enough to receive any support from anyone, we would have to take severe actions, and laid out the foundations, which of course led to the devastation loss of 3,500 people at that time, which would, in terms of their jobs. We changed and suspended our flying out of Gatwick, deciding to shrink the fleet, of course, suspension of flying thereafter. But it was at the end of March that our battle for survival really took front stage for us, and we knew that this was going to be a long run.
So I'm curious. So corporates and airlines, I'm sure, do this more than anybody, have disaster recovery plans. So you've written you have a disaster recovery plan. Was there anything in your kind of DR plans that came even close to this kind of scenario
an excellent question, because actually for people in the UK, and this will resonate, of course, in the British American business, we had prepared for a hard Brexit. And all our plans were geared towards a hard Brexit, basically shutting down of borders, a collapse in the British pound, and evaporation of demand because of the fact that we are so exposed to the UK-US border travel. So we had what we called a bookend plan, which was a devastatingly hard Brexit. And we basically looked at, so we'd already thought what would happen if demand fell.
But presumably that didn't imagine kind of basically 100%.
No, it didn't, but a lot of the principles were in there. For example, really focusing on cash flow positive flying only. The fact that we may need to concentrate our efforts in Heathrow rather than anywhere else, because we felt that consumer demand will be lower. It wasn't actually business demand. We thought consumer demand will be lower in the context of a hard Brexit. The fact that we would have to possibly shrink in response to that. The fact that there could be no flying for a period of time. So the hard Brexit was the beginning of the playbook, and we took that and then, of course, expanded and went far beyond that. Again, I do want to say again and again, the mission statement that we set ourselves was very simple: protect Virgin Atlantic, and of course, protect as many jobs as we can, and fight for every single one of those jobs like our lives depended on it. And while we have lost in terms of jobs 1 in 2 of our company, we were just about 10,000 pre-pandemic, and will be about 5,300 as of the end of this week, just to show you the scale of the decisions that we've taken. But we have fought for every single job, and we understand that when things return to a bit more normalcy, we will welcome many of these people back into Virgin Atlantic, just as we've done in the post 9/11 and the ash cloud.
Yeah, so that's super interesting, because I wonder whether DR plans, if one building goes down for a period of time, and you've got a kind of protocol, but I wonder how many corporate disaster recovery plans even got close to thinking about the kind of scale. I just don't think it did. And
no, they didn't.
A new consulting gig in the future about
how many organizations really prepare themselves for the black swan. I'm saying again, in the UK, if you did a preparation for a very severe hard Brexit,
right,
you probably came as close as you can, or in the case, of course, of airlines, a devastating and probably not whatever happened, a natural event or a catastrophe. And we have all of those, but this was a culmination of everything. But I'll give you the flip side of that. Indeed, a building going down, did we think that we could all work remotely? Well, we are. And the business is
amazing,
running.
Hasn't it?
Yeah,
it's been amazing. Yeah. I mean, that has been Well, there are two sides of that coin, aren't there? One, the first is that it's been incredible how resilient the comms, like what we're talking on now, and the kind of the Wi-Fi and the internet capability to allow us to do that. On the other hand, it's also meant that people can work remotely, and so the impact on cities and so on. So if this had happened 10 years ago, probably people would have had to go into their offices more, as they did in the 1968 crisis. So it has implications both ways, but it's been extraordinary the speed at which corporates were able to flip into those who don't need to be physically present, because you've of course got employees who need to be physically present, so to provide that service. But so before we come to the financing and other issues, talk us through the big decisions that you had to make. When you think back about what were the most challenging and difficult decisions that you had to make, or the biggest, or the ones with the biggest kind of implications. You've talked about Gatwick, you've talked about, of course, your people, which must have been devastating. But just talk us through, those big decisions.
Indeed, look, the big decisions are always the people, especially in a company like Virgin Atlantic, where the ethos of the human being, the person, is so essential to our brand and our ability to provide a superior service across the Atlantic. That is, we've always said our people is our magic sauce, but I think being bold and ahead, as I mentioned, that reading the Ferguson article and talking to my leadership team and knowing that we're going to have to severely reduce the size of the company, and that's just to get to the phase where we can complete a restructuring. Indeed, knowing that there is a way to do a solvent recapitalization. We are the only airline that has done a solvent, privately funded solvent recapitalization in the world. We have received zero money from the government other than the job support scheme and, of course, the coronavirus job retention scheme. So, and then when we did all of that, when we finally negotiated with all our creditors who've been fantastic in supporting us, we said that we will take another view, that the recovery will be slower and there could be a devastating impact even in the run up to Christmas and beyond. And we took another decision to reduce our size, which we announced on September the 4th. So I think the people is at the heart of it. I also, reduced the size of my team to reflect the size of the company. And of course, people expect that of me and expect that of the leadership team. But we did it in a different way. So one of the things, one big decision was I wanted people to hear the bad news from me and not from the media. And we were not always successful. There have been leaks to do with the people that we've knew what we were doing with, and I'm not saying who they are because I don't know who leaked it, but most of the time we were able to talk to our people first. That is always the audience. I remember I've had a number of calls with the entire company, 10,000 people, where they heard my voice break when I told them the size of the sacrifice that I'm asking every single one of them to make, and doing that in a way that still maintains trust in the organization, that we're doing whatever we can, has maintained the spirit of Virgin Atlantic in a way that is amazing to see every single day. And I'm literally humbled by the team I work with and the company that I represent.
Well, I'm gonna ask you about kind of leadership lessons and the impact on you and how you get your support in a moment. But let's go back to the things you touched on early on in that answer, and the support from government, or the lack of it. So back in kind of March or April, when it was clear what the scale of this crisis was going to be, the company talked to the British government. One of your shareholders, obviously Richard Branson, talked to the British government, or made it clear that the company is going to need help. So no direct financial help was forthcoming for UK airlines from the British government. That's clearly different from what's happened in the US. It's also different. I don't know everywhere, but I know what happened in Germany, and I'm sure across other European carriers as well. Yeah, can you talk about that? And
yeah, I can't talk
what
about
what your interaction was with government, and were you surprised by it? And just general reactions.
Yeah, I'll keep. Look, first of all, I am very conscious that my private conversations with the government are private, but I will. Yeah. But I will provide.
There's also been some public comments.
Yes,
as well,
public. So. Yes. But I hasten to say that I am not the source for this. When I'm on the record, I'm on the record. By the way, Duncan, there are chats and questions, so you may just want to take a look.
Yeah, no, I'm keeping an eye on them. I am
fantastic. So in terms of the government, look, our chancellor issued a letter on March the 24th where he said very clearly that there should be support for our industry, but the government would want to be the lender of last resort. And he stuck to his guns on this one, and I have to respect that point of view, and we worked accordingly with that. There is about 98 billion pounds of support to airlines around the world. Of course, over $50 billion in the US alone, of course, Germany, and France and the Netherlands, and even in Asia. The UK has a different stance, and we've worked in accordance with the guidelines provided. One of the big calls, again, going back there, is the understanding that the only way we do this is to adhere to the letter that was issued by our chancellor, despite the difficulty, using some changes in the law. We are the first company to go under the new, the new restructuring law in the UK. It all worked out kind of in that capacity. And that despite the fact that a lot of people thought that what we were trying to do, a solvent recapitalization without the tool of a Chapter 11, was impossible, we did not lose sight of the big picture and the belief that Virgin Atlantic deserves to be around for the service it provides for passengers, for the amazing people that we have in the company, and with ingenuity, hard work, and dedication and resiliency, we were able to get it done. So by the way,
hasn't Grant Shapps talked about, that they have given a lot of aid? I mean, I saw a speech a few days ago from him about 1.8 billion of COVID corporate financing. I didn't really fully understand it, if I'm honest. But
there were facilities in the UK that were made available. We did not qualify. Some of our competitors got between 300 to 600 million pounds. But when I said that to date, about 100 million pounds of government support around the world has been provided, and the UK is at 1.8, despite having one of the most thriving aviation industries in the world, leading companies, leading airports, I think the level of support coming in from government here is low. By the way, this is not over yet. We have to see what this winter brings along. It's going to be a very, very tough winter. And you can already see that the news is percolating around us, whether it's in France or in the Netherlands with our partners, support in Germany, possibly post the elections in the US, a new package of support to the much needed industry. The thing that I think—
there have been two huge tranches of financial support.
The huge mistake I think the huge difference here is that our government has not yet seen the merits of looking at aviation, not just airlines, aviation as a national infrastructure. And we have provided so much services to the National Health Service. We providing PPE from the get-go on cargo-only flights. We know that the vaccine needs to travel around the world. We say it's the biggest product launch in the history of mankind. It's about to come upon us. And this product launch requires very specific airlift under very specific conditions that not everyone can do. So to think that airlines are just nice to have, I think is a mistake. And I think some of the other countries understand that it is a national infrastructure worth protecting. And we believe that at some point, even the UK will see that.
Yeah, there's a bit of chat going on. And I know from people in the airline business about the UK government pledging to do whatever it takes to get UK businesses through this crisis, and why it almost looked like the aviation business was being singled out as an industry that wasn't being helped. And I don't know whether that's fair or not, because we tend to think at BAB that actually the economic response by both the US government and the UK government, I mean, the scale of it has been so huge, and you tend to give people the benefit of the doubt that they're trying to do the right thing, and I think that's right. But was it fair to say that the aviation industry had been singled out for not being helped?
I've got to respect the letters and the very clear statements. I still refer, unfortunately, to the March 24 letter. Yeah. We adhere to the letter of the law, which the lender of last resort is the government.
Right.
They did not see themselves as a lender of last resort, and that we should do everything
find
in our
out
power.
What you can. Well, yes. and I guess in a way you proved them right.
We proved them in many ways, but I'm saying the game is not over.
Yeah, no.
If there is a next chapter, which I think this winter will bring upon us a very difficult period for all of us. By the way, we must open borders. I'm sure we'll talk about testing.
Yeah, we're going to.
And of course, the corridors between New York and New Jersey. Yes,
we've
good.
got plenty of time. We're going to get to that.
But this game is not over. I'm hopeful about the vaccine. I see it, given the stuff that I already know in terms of movement of vaccine around the world. But we've proven that we can do more. But at some point, even the most willing parties need some help. And I don't think it's massive amounts of support, especially when all our competitors, or most of our competitors outside of the UK, are receiving this type of aid.
And at around that time, you got some pretty unfair coverage as well in the press about your high profile shareholder and Richard Branson, and how did the company kind of feel about that? I mean, that felt a bit brutal.
It was brutal, and I think undeserved. And at the end of the day, Richard Branson put 200 million pounds of his own money, sold shares in Galactic to fund Virgin Atlantic, to protect the company, to protect the jobs, and ensure we have a fighting chance to get to the other side of this pandemic, because there is another side of this pandemic, and we will be ready to take off quite seriously and literally after that period. But one of the things that we did is we reminded everyone that we are talking about Virgin Atlantic, not the owners of the companies.
No.
We don't talk about the anonymous shareholders of our American counterparts, or the governments of the Netherlands or Germany or France who own big stakes now in these companies. This is about the company itself, and we showed that we talked only about the things that matter to Virgin Atlantic. Indeed, I became kind of a spokesperson for the company, but our people spoke for themselves, in the sense that they were doing amazing work on behalf of the NHS, volunteering in ambulance services. Our cargo teams repatriating over 3,500, 2,600 cargo-only flights. We were one of the first to do cargo-only flights, and tremendous, I think 1,500 tons of PPE brought to this country. So our actions speak for themselves. And indeed, and by the way, Richard Branson did not deserve some of this, but I totally understand. People look at billionaires.
People don't trouble. I mean, people don't. Sort of general public may not understand the distinction between Virgin Group and Virgin Atlantic. I mean, people, and it's the pros and it's the sort of plus and minuses of having such a high profile kind of shareholder. Once removed, it's these things cut both ways.
It comes with the territory, and I think he. Of course, he didn't love this period, but I think he's recovered quite nicely from it. And the actions speak louder than anything. He invested 200 million pounds alongside 170 million pounds from a firm called Davidson Kempner. So 370 million pounds of the 1.2 billion restructuring that we completed came from Richard Branson, and that shows the love for Virgin Atlantic, the need to support it, and of course the belief in the future.
So just give us a bit more detail about this recap. Then you've had some fresh cash, and then there's a combination of some shareholder sort of debt forgiveness or and creditor facilities. Well, can you just talk around about how it's structured, and also, I guess, what kind of runway that gives you, if you excuse the pun, but
fair. Yes.
You know,
So
how much dry powder do you have to get through what's going to be a difficult 6 months or so ahead?
yeah, so I'll start with the end. First of all, when we did this recapitalization, we planned for the worst, not for the best. As I mentioned, we've been trying to be ahead of the curve every single time. We called what we call our plan of record, but we have downside cases which really factor on the opening of the US border. And I'll come back to that.
Yeah.
But the plan itself that we announced, it was actually ratified by both the UK and the US courts on September the 2nd and September the 3rd, announced publicly on September the 4th, is really 1.2 billion of restructuring. But it came on top of the fact that we have delayed some of our fleet, and that generated about 880 million pounds. We've cut our costs by over 335 million pounds. Yeah. All that was a precursor to a 1.2 billion restructuring, of which 370 of new capital, about 400 from shareholder deferrals for brand fees and other fees that we pay for technology and other services provided by both Delta and Virgin, and a tremendous work with our creditors, mostly, of course, the airplane leasing that we have, such that we deferred, we don't forgo, we just defer it to a period when we recover. And of course, an agreement with the credit card acquirers, which is always at the heart of any restructuring with an airline. And we have the ability to continue to trade and so forth. Now, I would say, how long is the runway? The runway is, in our plans, we see the opening of the US borders, we're hoping before year end, but our plans see that may be happening only in the springtime, around Easter or so. And our job is to make sure that we have enough cash to trade through that and benefit from the recovery. Now, if you tell me that borders are shut down for the next year or so between the US and the UK, and there's no international travel other places, it's not Virgin Atlantic. I think the point is, this is not a Virgin Atlantic issue any longer.
No, it becomes
an industry issue.
Yeah.
So
well,
I
it's
think
not just your industry, it's multiple other industries.
And I think people need to understand that aviation and travel in the UK is 500,000 jobs at risk here. Trade between the UK and the US is $262 billion. $50 billion travel on planes between the US and the UK. The UK is the US 7th largest trade partner, and of course the US is our largest. So it's inconceivable that we do not find a way to open up the skies in a time where the economy needs every boost it can have. And with testing, we have that ability to do so, as long as we get our governments to walk away from closed borders and quarantine.
Well, let's talk about that because we've been, as you know, we've been arguing at British American Business for some sort of protocol to be accepted by the US and UK government that would allow people to avoid the quarantine requirement, which is what is stopping us all from traveling. Well, into the UK at least, and into the US, of course, there's a blanket prohibition at the moment. And we've argued that a pre-flight test, and if it's deemed necessary, a post-flight test, so 48 hours, no more than 48 hours before you depart, and then no sooner than 48 hours after you land. And if both of those are negative, where's the risk? Why would there be any level of increased risk? And yet, and I know there are some friends of ours from the UK government on the call today, and in the DIT, they don't have any responsibility for this, but the response has been so, it's just been extraordinary trying to get any form of response. And can you talk about what you've been doing? And I know there's a consortium of airlines, and John Honkay at Heathrow has been very active on this. And what have you heard anything different? And can you shed any light on why there's been such a sort of?
No. So first of all, I totally understand how we started. We started off with the fact that there was discrepancies in the infection rate of COVID-19 versus nations, and you did not want to import. If you felt that your cases were low and somebody arriving from a place where cases were high. You did not want to take the risk, of course, that the infections would be basically imported into your country. That no longer holds, by the way, because unfortunately, the pandemic or the virus is spread across our nations, US, UK, Europe, Asia. Of course, Asia has fared the best out of this. So the reason that it started, I totally understand. And, in retrospect, we're still in this, we will figure out if this was the right response. But we now know that, if you wear masks and you adhere to the social distancing, and you clean the planes, and you do the HEPA filters, and on it goes, planes are not disproportionately importing cases. Our governments are still stuck on older calculations and different pieces of science. Testing is just as vaccine is moving, so has testing. And there is now an ability to do rapid point of care, PCR quality testing, and even further in the future, antigen and pregnancy style approach testing. All that is available to open the skies. So I think, and I think there's been studies in the US that only 40 cases actually showed up out of 1.2 billion people traveling in the US. I mean, there's preponderance of evidence that things need to move. We, together with other airlines, and I'm actually pleased to say that there is now more that unites us than not in terms of opening the borders. We are eager to compete in the marketplace, but we know that we all need to do that. And whether it's British Airways or United or American, totally competitors to us, we are all combining our forces to ensure that governments, especially the ones that we can impact in the US and in the UK, take note of the advancements of science and the probabilities. And we're actually funding research to kind of demystify and debunk the 7% number, which is being touted by our government, which is absolutely not relevant and flawed.
I read Grant Chapps's speech to your industry convention of last week. I was left scratching my head a bit. I mean, when you actually read what he said, I mean, with all due respect to a government,
we have now, there is independent research being published on every Friday. The next installment will maybe on Monday, funded by Virgin Atlantic and our partners, including the industry bodies in the UK and the US, which explains the flaws of this model, which really tells us that quarantine should be ended and replaced with pre-departure testing. That's the way to go. And adherence, by the way, to masks and cleaning.
Oh, absolutely.
And all the measures that need to do that. We are sticklers for the rule. We have and promote fly safe, fly well. And our programs have changed dramatically to accommodate. And we must also understand that there is months and months to go before vaccine is available to everyone when indeed it comes. So in the interim period, which is undetermined in time, we must use testing as the way to free our economies, reunite families, and get moving again while treating the virus, and of course, never diverting testing capacity from the front line.
Yeah, I mean, and just to add to that, I mean, you're as a carrier, you are very popular amongst, particularly amongst SMEs, independent business people, smaller firms, as well as the giants.
Basically everyone.
Yeah, of course. But for big companies who've already got established feet on the ground and corporate setups in their market, in different markets, they can cope at the moment. But if you're a SME and you've got so your business is in the UK, but you've got a satellite office in the States, or the other way around, if you can't go there, I mean, you're just not gonna invest. You are not gonna take the kind of risks with your own capital or shareholder capital. If you as the business owner can't go and talk to your customers or meet a new supplier, you're just not going to do it. And so, whilst the big giant companies may be able to use their local management to continue to make decisions, SMEs are just paralyzed if they can't get to the market. It's a real problem. And we keep saying this to the DIT, but and to
I
anyone
think
who will listen.
all of us should support this quest. But this is not just about businesses. This is about seeing loved ones who have been devastated by the fact that they're alone during this crisis. I know you're traveling.
Yeah, we were talking
yeah.
before the call started. Right? I'm coming to the UK to see my 88-year-old mother in December. I'm going to find a way.
And of course, and by the way, I don't expect, the natural question is business travel coming back the way it was? No, it's not. But is business travel coming back? Yes, it is. Now, what is the long-term impact? I do not know. I do know that leisure will come first, and visiting friends and relatives will come first. And connectivity is essential to fueling our economies and ensuring that this world continues to function as we anticipated, especially in its time of need, which is a deep recession, especially in Europe.
Yeah. Yeah. So where are you today in terms of what are the operations of Virgin Atlantic? Where are you flying to? How many passengers are you carrying? Which, you've got, I think the Caribbean routes are open. What's up and running and what's closed? Where are you?
So first of all, we're adding flights all the time. So the good news is we're adding flights. Indeed, we've started to fly to the US. Of course, the UK is closed, but for US nationals and permanent residents, it is open. So whether it's Los Angeles or New York or Boston or Atlanta or Miami, we're flying. Of course, the Caribbean is a big deal for us, and we've added new flights to Pakistan from both Manchester and Heathrow. So our home in the north is thriving. We are now adding capacity from Manchester to Delhi and Mumbai that will start in December and in January this year. So the visit friends and relatives is an important market that we provide a tremendous service. So in terms of capacity, I expect us to be at around 25% of capacity in Q4 and then increasing thereafter. In our plans, revenues for 2021, we expect to be under our current estimates, and we're only doing estimates, to be at 50% of 2019, and then return to normal operations probably in 23, maybe a bit later. But the point is that we only fly what is contributing to cash. We are fortunate that our cargo business has been
right. I was going to ask you about cargo. You've got a reasonable cargo business.
Yeah, but we're using our passenger planes in a way that they were not intended to. This is cargo only, and now we add on that the ability when we fly to Shanghai and Hong Kong and Tel Aviv and other places. We're using the bridge of the cargo business to take on passengers, Nairobi and other places. So the network is gearing up. Demand, of course, is lower. We're talking about probably about 20-25% load factors, but the cargo business is the thing that allows us to continue flying to many destinations.
Great. So I'm just going to switch gears now. I'm going to come to some of the. I've been picking up some of the points from the chat and the Q&A, and I'll come back to some of those in a minute. But I'm just going to ask you about, if you don't mind, the sort of impact on you. I mean, so you there you are. You're the CEO. You've been forced to make these extraordinarily difficult decisions. Someone put a question in about resilience. I mean, where did you get your resilience from? I mean, do you have is it a tight-knit group of senior leaders at Virgin Atlantic that take these decisions together, or are you getting outside advice, or do you have a mentor? Just talk about
I'll start from where I began, really. First of all, early on, when I understood this is going to be the job of a lifetime, I and my team, you'll hear that I talk about the team more than I want to talk about how I cope. Yeah. But I asked myself a very simple question. Why am I doing this? Because this is going to be painful, and it is painful beyond belief. Yeah. Rewarding in many ways because of the achievements that we've had in terms of saving the company and protecting the jobs. And I figured that I was not doing this for money, because I took a 20% haircut, no bonuses, blah, 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 right? And I'm not doing this for ego. I'm doing this for Virgin Atlantic and to ensure that the next 36 are better than the previous 36 years. And I think everyone in our company is doing it for the right reasons. So once I had my mission and the motivations set, I could focus myself. I didn't care about other things. Second is, and I tell this to the team, I ensured that I was combat ready every single day, both physically and mentally. I have a Peloton bike. This is like an advertisement for Peloton. I work on it every single day if I can, just to ensure that the flow of blood is hastened and slowed, not just by work, but also by worldly things. I'm lucky to have a very supportive family, and which really see what I'm doing as beyond. Yeah, I was handed this hand. I didn't choose it. No one did.
No.
You can either rise to the occasion, but the biggest power I get is the power of the team. They are literally amazing. If you think what I do is interesting, every single one of them has demonstrated resilience, ability to support each other, camaraderie, belief in the vision, and in adversity, believe in the big picture of what we're trying to accomplish here.
Yeah, I had a catch up with Cornel on another call a couple of days ago, and you can see it. The effort that everyone has been making, and very difficult.
And then
particularly when you're talking, you're dealing with your customer related people.
And I think if you look, some of the decisions we've made over the years have paid back positively now. One of our principles of our 3 pillars of our strategy is best in partnering. Our partners have been outstanding to us, even in the difficult conversations where we're saying we're not paying. We don't have money. You're going to have to take a deferral. But you're doing this because it's the right thing for the company. It's also the right thing for you because you're going to get more so best in partnering. The investment in our people, the discretionary effort we have from every single individual, whether they're staying or going, is unbelievable. And the other thing that we've added is we have communicated immensely in real English, in truthful statements, no sugarcoating, and everybody knows that what we say is what we mean, and it's coming from the right intentions.
So the resilience for you and your team, and you've talked about, it must, the impact on your colleagues who've had to leave the airline or are on furlough and so on, is huge too. And it's not unique to the airline industry, of course. It's not. The challenges for so many companies and sectors have been just huge. But have you presumably you've been conscious of the kind of mental health issues and other issues that that people may be going through? Is there, have you been able to help in some ways in that area?
Yep. Yes. So first of all, we, part of the, we're kind of, this is almost as close to battle, but not a real war. This is a business war. Yeah, thankfully. So a lot of it is about, support and, communication, and knowing that you can talk to your peers and the people who you report into. We acknowledge the fact that this is a fragile situation, that you need to find power from within and from your friends around you. But it's the acknowledgement that this is a very long battle or a journey for us for survival, and it's not going to be solved in one way. I think the peak, of course, was September, but we are already preparing ourselves for the next wave. On Monday, 2,680 people who have been on furlough, who have not worked since April, some of them, are coming back to Virgin Atlantic. And we will be telling them on Monday that it doesn't make a difference if you were on furlough or working your ass off in the company. Every single one of our players and people contributed to the survival of Virgin Atlantic. So we talk about it. We convene all the things that we can with social distancing. It's the camaraderie, but again, we are proud of who we are, and it's paying big time, knowing that we have this group of individuals. And I feel
I don't want to embarrass you, but I don't want to embarrass you, but on the chat we've got a comment: Shai, you are the best. VS is the most loved airline, red on the inside and red on the outside. Now, I don't know whether that comes from one of your employees.
It must be one of us, right? Because it sounds too close to home.
So when you think about the future, I guess you've got the short-term future, which is clearly going to be uncertain, than the sort of longer term. How different do you think it's going to be from how you would have answered that question a year ago? You've got things like sort of business agreements, like you have a joint venture with Air France, KLM, and China Eastern? Is that going to happen? Is that going to still be extant? What about routes that you're likely to add or drop? The configuration of your fleet. What do you think the future? The next normal, to borrow the McKinsey phrase. What does that kind of look like for you guys?
Yeah. So first of all, we've shrunk our company by 50%. We've shrunk our fleet by 20%, despite the fact that we can now fly the same amount of sectors. We're just so much more efficient. But we characterize the next period into 3 categories: survival, love, and profitability. Survival being our fight for survival, and where every penny counts, where we can only fly cash positive flying, where every decision we are making is for the long-term survival of Virgin Atlantic, where I'm asking every single one of us to think like an owner and act like an entrepreneur. So that's survival. And we cannot think about the long run until we ensure our survival. Love is the fact that we should also recognize that we've harmed customers, through this refund process that took us longer because of the volumes, canceling flights, the uncertainties. We need to get to our very best very, very soon. Re-engaging with our people. I mentioned the 2,700 or so people who are coming back to us and need to see that we have evolved dramatically over the past 9 months, and we're not going back. And then it's profitability, where Virgin Atlantic, it's fair to say, was not the most optimally financial company, but with the changes that we have now adopted, we believe that when travel resumes, we are really, really well positioned to benefit from the structural changes available to us, our position at Heathrow, our partnership with Delta, Air France, and KLM, and of course, in China, all that continues. So, and of course, our standing with our leisure customers. We are a well-known leisure brand as well with our Virgin Atlantic holidays. So, as I mentioned, survival, love, and profitability in that order. And we're thinking between the immediate, like the next day, the next 6 months, but also thinking about a long-term future that is beyond the pandemic, where the future of Virgin Atlantic is secure, and the next 36 years are even better than the previous ones.
So that's helpful, and we've got just looking at another question, that this is a bit specific about the testing that we talked about, the pre-flight testing. There's quite a lot of companies and providers who are suggesting that they've got the solution, either a specific test or a means of communicating the fact that you've had a negative test. That's quite a big issue about fraud and ID and
data protection. Yes.
Are you backing a particular horse in this example, or are you just saying it's more about the principle that a negative test should mean you can fly?
No, we're backing horses, multiple horses. But first of all, I really want to congratulate United on what they've just done and announced.
Yeah, that's big. Actually, that was a question that came from United, I think. So.
Oh, perfect. So I want to congratulate them, because I think, the more people like United and ourselves that stand up and show what can be done, the better the principles are adhered to, and people understand this is a reality. About a month ago, we started to advance with a company called GeneMe and their UK subsidiary, rapid on-site testing, 30 minutes PCR quality testing, which is NHS without diverting, such that our crews, when they travel to Hong Kong, Barbados, and Shanghai, know that they are flying there safe without COVID-19. We've done over 1,000 tests already for this crew, and that's a first step. We are backing, of course, the Collinson and HAL, or Heathrow Airport, John Holland K efforts in Heathrow, and we are continuously monitoring, even more rapid testing. My position is very clear. I believe we should test every single passenger. Before that, we need to check every single member of crew on Virgin Atlantic, whether they're a cabin crew or flight deck. And ultimately, I would like to check and test every single member of my company, because I believe that's how you get to the point that with a sophisticated track and trace system, you can actually squash this pandemic. Now, both the US and the UK are behind, but the individual companies are ahead. And we will continue to demonstrate that testing is a viable option to ensure the safety and health and security of our passengers and people. And that is the only way to go until this thing is eradicated, which will take a bit of time.
Yeah, I mean, track and trace doesn't really seem to exist here in the United States.
But look at Asia, how wonderfully it does work. And Germany with their local, with their local track and trace capabilities, which of course are now being put to the test, but nonetheless, and I understand the liberal view that track and trace is potentially harming, civil liberties and the right for being anonymous. But in the grand scheme of things, I think this pandemic is causing greater harm to our society.
Yeah, we had a brief chat about that before we came on air, and it's a very interesting kind of subject, and probably not one that we need to go into now. But it's fascinating that different cultures have got different attitudes towards this. Both mask wearing, track and trace, providing information about your private life and all this kind of stuff. But I agree with you. We need to solve the problem.
Yeah, and I'm glad I'm not doing this after the elections. I mean, this is really for the elections, but this is, I think it's important to understand that we're in a collective fight and an individual cannot win this one on alone. Just as in Virgin Atlantic, it's about the collective and not about who is in charge.
Well, look, with that, I'm going to bring the discussion to a close and say, Shai, what a huge privilege it has been for me to have this conversation with you. And thank you for being so open with us about, what you've been through, the experience that you've had as a team. I will say that stress that, and that's always right. And what you've done, I think, is you've been quite open about the scale of the challenge. So you haven't been Pollyanna-ish about the future. It's really challenging, and we're not through this by any means yet. But you've remained optimistic as well, and positive, and it's been very interesting listening to you.
Yeah, thank you, Duncan. The only thing I would end is, those who know me, I never use the word optimist, only positivity, because positivity is a mindset and optimism is an outlook. I don't have a problem with a pessimist as long as they're positively inclined.
I know a joke about that, but for another time.
Okay.
Wonderful to see you.
Thank you very much.
Good luck with everything. And,
thank you.
We'll be rooting for you, as everybody on the call has been saying in the chat, and anything that we at British American Business can do to help. We are
write to your congressperson, and
don't worry, we're talking to them. So, all right. Well, with that,
thank you, Duncan.
You all very much,
and have a great weekend, and good luck in the elections.
And, thank you again, Shai.
Thank you.
Good to see you.